Hi, everyone. This is Jason. Welcome back to the channel. My guest today is Vince McPhillip, head of community at Pi Network. In addition to his work with Pi, Vince co-founded the Stanford Blockchain Collective, a group of 750 thought leaders, business people, engineers, and lawyers from across Stanford and Silicon Valley. Vince, welcome to the show.
Hello, Jason. Hey, thanks for having me, and hi to everyone out there that's viewing.
So the first thing I want to ask you, and this is the question I usually ask first to all of my guests, is how did you first get into cryptocurrency?
How did I first fall into the rabbit hole? So I actually took a little bit of a circuitous path into cryptocurrency, actually. So a lot of my background has been in studying ways in which you can bring people together in a way in which the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So I like to kind of call this designing collectively intelligent systems. I've done this in a few different capacities. My first one was a design collective that I helped build at Yale, where we were basically crowdsourcing college apparel from people on campus and then having people vote on the best one and printing out the best voted designs. I actually then built a wellness collective in Boston where I was working with yoga instructors, Tai Chi teachers, personal trainers to pool their skills together to better serve a cohort of patients and clients in Boston. And then eventually actually transitioned more into a nonprofit or NGO consulting role, where again, I was trying to help these organizations come together to be able to deploy their resources against collective challenges. So poverty, education, workforce development, those types of things. And, the interesting thing is that the missing ingredient in each one of these things was that it seemed hard to be able to do good for the world while also doing well for yourself financially. It seems that for whatever reason, we live in a world in which there's a stark trade-off between when people are making contributions to a collective good and then what their own individual well-being is. And so it wasn't until I came to Stanford that I really started to kind of like dive more deeply into the potential of cryptocurrencies and blockchains. And what I saw here was a financial instrument that we could design that would allow people to essentially collect those contributions that they were making to a community, but then also have an economic mechanism by which they could be rewarded for those contributions. And so really that's what took me into crypto. It's how do you build better economic incentives that reward people for making contributions to some type of collective good. And that's really how I kind of came into crypto, more from a social angle.
Oh, nice, nice. Was Pi your first cryptocurrency blockchain related project, or was there anything that came before that kind of led into it?
Oh, good question. So I would say the first foray into cryptocurrency was actually a much more grassroots organization. So this was the Stanford Blockchain Collective that you mentioned earlier in the interview. And you can think of that as kind of like an open source educational movement that I helped found at Stanford that was dedicated to helping everyday people identify what cryptocurrency was and what role it could play in their lives, how it could make their lives better. In addition to doing that, I actually started to teach classes, so workshops to everyday people and business executives from around the world, again, trying to help them identify what the potential for this technology was and how it could make a meaningful difference in their lives. And it was in the course of kind of teaching that I then met my two co-founders who are two PhDs from Stanford. And, we basically started to come together to figure out, okay, let's not just tell, but let's show the power of this technology and actually directly bring it into people's lives. And that was the genesis of Pi.
Great. So tell me a little bit about Pi itself. I was looking at the website, and it's an app that allows you to mine crypto from your phone at a low energy cost.
Mm-hmm.
So was that important to you to begin with? Crypto has a reputation for being a high energy pool with
Right.
mining, and like we were talking about earlier, it takes specific specialized equipment to do this profitably now.
Right.
So how is Pi changing that? What is the, and well, how is Pi changing that? And also, what's the goal of doing it that way? Are you trying to show a more sustainable option? But you define that.
Right. So, one thing that actually, let's start first with, why did we basically design Pi in the way that we did, right? And one of the things that came out of, our explorations as a team was that one of the most important value propositions or values of cryptocurrencies or blockchains to everyday people was that there was this powerful instrument, again, that would allow them to capture greater value for the contributions that they make to the world.
Right.
And the ironic thing, though, is that, despite the fact that this is such a powerful thing that's so needed in today's world, right, where we're in a world of growing inequality and growing dissatisfaction, right, was that, the existing cryptocurrencies were far and away out of reach of everyday people, right? So if I wanted to basically acquire Bitcoin and start to kind of participate in this cryptocurrency economy, it meant that either I would have to, whip out like a, 50-page manual and learn how to set up a server in my basement.
Right. Right.
Or I would have to go on Coinbase or some other exchange and spend 3-4 months worth of rent to acquire the cryptocurrency. I mean, I live in San Francisco, so it's a little bit less. Maybe it's more like 2 months worth of rent in San Francisco. But yeah, so it just seemed like this huge disconnect, that this technology that was fundamentally about empowering everyday people was itself so far out of the reach of those people. And so that was a lot of the motivating question for Pi when we first started to design it, was how do we actually build a cryptocurrency that is more accessible and designed for the use by everyday people on the street. And so that's what led us to bring it onto mobile phones, led us to our novel consensus algorithm, and led us to the application that you see today.
Right. Well, and you bring up a good point about being usable by people, because you look at even in a down market, a single Bitcoin's over $8,000 right now, right? So that's more likely to scare off new investors than it is to convince them to dig deeper into so something that is easy to attain and on your phone, and something that is geared towards everyday use is a better entry for a lot of people. I mean, that's not to say that you can't buy, you don't have to buy a complete Bitcoin to own.
Of course,
Bitcoin,
there's partial, right? Yes, of course, right.
It's Satoshi's, like you can buy a tenth of a Bitcoin, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, just to pick up on that point there, I think the key thing is not necessarily how much does it cost to buy either a full Bitcoin or a partial Bitcoin. It's almost more, what are you spending relative to the energy and effort that people expended in the past to earn the currency. And so many people are, shocked today to learn that, the earliest participants and the earliest miners in Bitcoin were essentially able to, fire up a piece of software on their computers, right? Because they were so few miners at that time, and just, leave it running while they were going to the gym or, eating dinner or what have you, and they would come back and there would be Bitcoin rewarded.
Bitcoin there, right?
Yeah, I mean, essentially at the cost of computing power, right? And so I think it's, people often bring this up, that it's like, yeah, of course, but you can buy less Bitcoin. I think I'm more focused on what is the, the relative costs when you compare it to what the earliest participants in that system were able to earn. And of course, by the way, I really don't want to underestimate the leap that all of those folks took with Bitcoin, right? Imagine mining this digital currency, right? I mean, it was just completely, probably seemed ridiculous to most people at the time. So I don't want to, I don't want to kind of trivialize the contributions that they've made to the space.
Right.
However, at the same time, I want to argue that we need to create systems in which a much larger portion of people can also participate in that type of system. And that's what Pi is trying to do.
Right, right, right. So let's talk a little bit more about the energy aspect.
Yes.
So there have been miners that had said that you could use them from your phone. So how does Pi deal with that being a low energy consuming application? How would you explain it to a layman how that's possible?
Absolutely. The first thing to note here is that, just as a quick review, essentially the problem that we're trying to solve for here is how you effectively secure a distributed ledger. Now, there are several ways in which you can do that. The most common way that people have heard of is a particular type of consensus algorithm called proof of work.
Right.
Right. The challenge with a distributed ledger, right, that technically anyone can write to or read from, right, a community-owned ledger, is that you have to keep it safe, right? This is no longer locked up behind Bank of America's vault,
Right. Their vault.
these vaults, right? It's technically an open source piece of code. Anyone can go out there and essentially try to manipulate it, edit it, right? And then all of a sudden, I could go on there and basically claim that all the Bitcoin in the world belong to me. Right.
Right.
So the way that proof of work essentially secures these distributed ledgers is by imposing a cost to play, right? So if you want to write to this ledger, you need to expend energy or show that you have some skin in the game and that you really mean it when you're trying to update transactions. All right.
Right.
So that's one approach of doing it. All right. And actually, when we were designing Pi and we kind of came to the conclusion that mining was fundamentally that was the application that we needed to open up for everyday people, we stepped back and we said, okay, we need to make mining more accessible, ideally something that can run on a mobile phone. We did a survey of different consensus algorithms or ways in which people are able to secure distributed ledgers and found the Stellar consensus protocol, right?
Okay.
And what Stellar does is that it uses a different type of consensus algorithm called federated Byzantine agreements. And I'm going to do a vast oversimplification of this. My CTO, Nicholas Kokolas, who's a brilliant PhD from Stanford, would do a much better job, but I'll try to simplify it. The basic idea is that in these federated Byzantine agreements, each person creates a circle of people that they trust. So they elect essentially, let's say 3 to 5 people and say, I will only agree to transactions that these 3 to 5 people agree to.
Okay.
And essentially what happens then is that the network essentially aggregates all of these quorums, or what we call in our application security circles, to determine who can and can't be trusted to execute transactions on the ledger.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So the result of that is that mining Pi, you're not establishing trustworthiness by having to burn a lot of energy on your phone or on your computer.
Right.
The way that you're contributing to the trust of the network is by providing information that you already know about who you do and don't trust in the world. And that's what actually powers Pi's consensus algorithm and will allow us to secure our distributed ledger. And so it's not an energy intensive process. It's almost the same amount of energy it takes to send a friend request on Facebook, right? With the difference being that there's a much smaller group of people that you need to identify.
What I like about what you're doing is you address that head on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think for a lot of people, what it takes to mine cryptocurrency is as an afterthought now, because most of us, when we would get it, we don't do it that way anymore. We go to some chain, we go to some app that lets you just buy it. We don't think that there's a server farm in China that's like, a block long, and all they're doing is mining Bitcoin, that, right? So I'm glad that that Pi is addressing that head on. So thank you for explaining that to us.
Of course.
So can I ask you about the blockchain collective?
Absolutely.
is that is it's regional to the Bay Area, but is there a plan to expand that to other schools?
Yeah, good question. So the blockchain collective actually recently merged with another club at Stanford. So it's now called the Stanford Blockchain Club, and it's a student-run organization that is essentially dedicated to educating and advancing the knowledge of both students, in this at Stanford, obviously, but also the broader Silicon Valley area. I think one of the reasons that we started the Blockchain Collective, so this was back in 2017, was because it felt like there was really a gap in the market, in a sense, right? In the sense that, Stanford has a very deep technical background. So
Right.
obviously, a lot of the actual core technology of cryptography was actually originally developed at Stanford. And when I was there as a student in business school, there was a very proficient, kind of more technical club that was dedicated to studying cryptocurrencies. And so the Blockchain Collective was formed as a way in which, again, there's a common theme here. Everyday people would be able to participate, learn, and contribute to again what I like to think of as an open source educational movement. And
Right.
one of the important things I would say, that was an important founding principle of the Blockchain Collective and continues to be a important principle of Pi is one of inclusivity. Okay. Cryptocurrencies are technology, a product, a movement, some might say, that intersects across many fields, many disciplines, and has the potential to affect potentially everyone's life,
Right.
on the planet. And that means that we need experts and contributors from computer science, from mathematics, to mobile application development, to psychology, to economics, to politics, to governance. And so that was really one of the big motivating principles of the Blockchain Collective, and why that group grew so quickly and was able to serve such a wide audience. And that's one of the motivating principles of Pi as well.
Like I say, technology removes limitations, right?
Right.
So there's jobs to be had in blockchain technology. There's, people can create the next great app. They can come work for startups and get their feet in the door where they couldn't go to IBM or
Right.
Apple to do the same thing.
Right.
So it's good that the collective's out there, and hopefully, I'm really hoping that you guys expand down to Southern California soon, because we have some college kids that need to learn how this stuff works.
Absolutely.
So my last question is, what's next for Pi? Like, what's the next phase of development?
Good question. So, one thing is that it's been a pretty remarkable run, just over the course of the last 6 months. So we took the application out of beta or I'm sorry, it's in beta. We took it out of stealth on March 14th, 2019. And since then, we've added hundreds of thousands of people to the platform from every corner of the world. When I look at the next steps for Pi, there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit for us to harvest when it comes to improving the mobile application experience. We're still very much in this, in more of a beta phase when it comes to that experience, and we want to really kind of improve that over time. We also want to start to experiment with ways in which we can deepen the social features of this cryptocurrency. So that's one thing that's a little bit new and different about Pi. We think of ourselves as a social cryptocurrency. And right now in the application, for example, there are communications channels and chats and lots of activity from people, connecting with each other from around the world.
Right.
And we really want to be able to build on top of that. At this point, one of the biggest, priorities for me and what's on my mind is essentially starting to expand the Pi team, the core team at Pi, in order to meet the growing demand from the people that we're serving all around the world. So if there are any, intrepid pioneers out there that are interested in contributing more deeply to the project, feel free to reach out to us through our landing page, which is mindpi.com.
And also, the right now there's an invite function on there.
Right.
Is that is that going to change soon, or would they still need to reach out to get access to demo of the platform?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so part of the reason that we have the invite function inside the application is actually also a security feature.
Okay.
Okay. One of the challenges that you'll face in any kind of cryptocurrency, or frankly any kind of digital system, is essentially ensuring that it remains trusted and ensuring that there are always real and trusted people that are participating in the process.
Right.
Part of why we have the invitation layer right now is that we need to be able to understand who people are being invited by, because we have a lot of like almost professional firms in the world, for example, that are creating server or phone farms with Pi, right? And so that's something that we want to leave in place for the foreseeable future. If anybody needs to get into the application, it is still an inclusive application. So if anybody needs to get in, you can always use the Pi core team, invitation code, or maybe Jason, if you have a code, they can use yours as well.
Yeah, and I will link that in the description, and so that you guys can check it out. So, Vince, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you doing this with me. Where can we find you on social media?
Oh, good question. So it's funny. I haven't typically maintained a massive social media presence personally to date, although there are lots of folks that are asking for that. So Pi itself has social media presence, which you can find from our landing page as well on both Facebook and Instagram for now. And I will presumably be, kind of linked to those. You can probably find me through there as well.
All right, great. So everyone, I'm going to put the links to Pi Network in the description below, as well as their socials. Once again, Vince, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with me. Going to be up in San Francisco at the end of the month, or San Francisco Blockchain Week. Hopefully we can get together and chat a little bit more.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'll look forward to that. Jason, thanks so much for the time, for the questions, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
I think I just heard that airplane you're telling me about.
Right there.
All right, thank you, Vince.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.